Hey Neppers, it's me, Wild Neptune. Pretty soon, we'll have a unit coming out in Kane that might be the destroyer of this content, Rift. Anyway, if you like this content or see more like it, a like, comment, and or subscription would be appreciated. Anyway, thanks for watching, let's go. So here we have Kane, Fire Warrior. He has modest health, pretty low speed overall, modest defense, some crit chance here, and very high attack, as noted right here by our good friends at Smilegate. Attack, release, and concentration. Okay, so let's see what he does. Starting off with the passive skill 2, Force Awakening. Very Star Wars like, I see. At the start of the battle, gains 50 fighting spirit. Upon receiving lethal damage, grants immortality and vampirism. Vampirism is just a lifesteal buff. For 1 turn, and resets cooldown of Feast of Predation, which I'm sure we'll get to, can only be activated once every 9, 6 with Mola's turns. After an ally attacks, if the target is inflicted with bleed, gains 10 fighting spirit. After an ally attacks, when fighting spirit is full, consumes all fighting spirit and makes the caster enraged for 2 turns. Okay, so he has some fighting spirit here. Fighting spirit always caps at 100, and if the target is bleeding, and that's a debuff that you have a lot of in the Rift right now, he gets more fighting spirit, and it's when an ally attacks, and which includes himself also. So you just get a bunch of fighting spirit, and you get enraged. What does this do? Well, we'll have to find out with the next skill. Now, I will point out that in most cases, when you have such a long cooldown for your immortality, like 6 turns, is it worth putting this in here? I don't know. He is going to be a Rift unit, and maybe this does actually come into effect where maybe the safety net is needed, or maybe it's not. We'll have to find out, but let's move on. Feast of Predation acquires 50 fighting spirit, with noting he starts with 50, so we get S3 for another 50 and gets 100 right off the bat, and basically enrage after his first turn. So attacks the enemy by unleashing their power. Their power? Okay. And grants increased attack greater for 2 turns to the caster. Damage dealt increased proportional number of debuffs inflicted on the target. Alright, so you'll have a lot of debuffs in Rift mode, so you'll do a lot more damage. That's the plan. I mean, pretty straightforward there, in my opinion. Anyway, let's move on to the skill 1. The skill 1 is Hammer Time. Okay. Attacks the enemy with a hammer and inflicts bleeding for 2 turns. So he bleeds and he has some bonus benefits from bleed and debuffing, okay? When the caster is enraged, ignores effect resistance. That's actually pretty good, because we do know that the Rift boss requires 105 effectiveness, and basically he just doesn't have to give up stats for getting his bleed off, so that's pretty good. And when it's the caster's turn, activates Rock Smash as an extra attack. So Rock Smash attacks all enemies by slamming the ground and dispels 1 debuff from the caster. So this is good, mainly to get your debuff counter up on the Rift boss. The Dispel 1 debuff is okay if you're burned or something like that, but I feel like that's less necessary and the extra attack is the more beneficial thing. Now, the big thing is, can you keep your enrage up the entire time? And I would say probably yes. The way that it works out, I would not be surprised if you simply was able to keep enraged up almost 100% of the time for the Rift boss if your team is tuned correctly, but that is just what I'm going with here. Now we have the artifact, Tyrant's Descent. When attacking, increases damage dealt by a certain percentage between 6 and 12, and an additional 3% for each debuff on the enemy, up to a maximum of 18 to 24. So at plus 15, it will be 9 and 21. If you are doing the math here, it does require, let me think here, 6 debuffs in order to get the maximum value from this. And I would say that 6 is generally the number most people want minimum for the Rift boss. So in most cases, at least for most of the fight, you will get maximum damage from this artifact when using a warrior, mainly Kane, I would assume. Is this necessary to be having Rift? Hard to say, but it is tuned and suited for it. So he is going to be on the next banner coming up, and the big question is he worth pulling? That's, I think, a little bit difficult to answer, maybe not so much. So this is how I see it here. He is very specifically tuned for Rift content, and I don't really see him doing much else anywhere else in the game. When Brieg came out, everybody was focusing on him in PvP, and they kind of looked over the fact that he might be good in PvE, myself included, right? I pulled on Brieg because I thought he looked cool, and yes, pulling on Kane because he looks cool is a valid reason to pull on him. However, I was rewarded for pulling on Brieg because he turns out to be so good in PvE content, like Expeditions, that now people are like, oh, maybe everybody should have this unit, because he is really good in that. And is Kane going to be very good in Rift, enough where people want to pull on him for Rift? I don't know. One of the problems here is that Brieg is good in several expos, and even though they do rotate, there are enough of them that Brieg will probably always be used in some content all year round. The same is not true for Rift. Because remember, even though Rift lasts for a long time, Smilecase said 4 to 6 months, they're all element specific. So even if he's good, like, technically for a Rift, he can't be used because they're gonna rotate out. And if they have one for all 5 elements, he could be out of a job for like 2 years. Is that a unit you want to pull on? One that's only be useful for like, that limited amount of time? I don't think so. And again, I don't see him being useful in other places. If he had some more utility, like a defense break, something like that, then maybe he would be okay in other places. But because he is so specifically suited for this one piece of content, which will go away eventually and not come back for a very long time, it is hard to justify pulling on him, in my opinion, unless you just really like his looks. And yes, he does look very cool. The other issue, too, is that anytime there's Hoochie Shop and a Tamarin banner, that always screams something like collab rerun or maybe like a triple banner. We are due for a Full Metal Alchemist rerun, and I think this might be a trap. Now, let's forget about all that. Let's pretend that we know that's not going to happen, even though I would argue that it probably will. And is Kane good enough in Rift to pull on him if you just want to be better at this Rift? That's hard to answer too, because even if he's like, say, the best slot DPS that you can have in Rift, also keep in mind too that the Rift you're watching right here that they're doing is at a high level, right? They have the extra attack heal thing, which is pretty far down on the Rift bar, but even if he is he going to improve your clear times from like 3 attempts to 2 attempts? And if he does do that, when is he going to do that? Like, how much energy are you going to save, or how much extra gear by running more rifts are you going to get if you pull on Kane? Are you willing to spend a pity to save, like, I don't know, 3,000 energy, right? Maybe 4,000, 5,000? Like, and if you are, how do you calculate how much you're actually saving in the first place? So, yeah, pretty, I think, difficult. I do think that Brieg is more of a unit for like whales to pull on, actually, because if he is best in slot for that, he'll help whales do Rift more and stuff and everything. And ironically, they're the people who need him the least, because people in Rift who can do it right now, they don't need him, right? They already have like relatively stable teams for it. And newer players, I say newer players, but like players just getting into Rift, they're going to be maybe not geared enough to even take advantage of him in the first place. So he's in a very weird spot, I would say, where again, I can't justify pulling on him right now. Too limited in scope, his future seems bleak, and yes, we might have collab / a triple banner coming too. Anyway, Wild Neptune. It's been a good one.